The TC Dojo is a TechCom community that is driven by you. Tell us what you want to learn. You choose the topics, and we find the experts. In the dojo session today, we are lucky to have Alan Hauser as our visiting dojo master. Alan is one of the he is kind of the name that everybody knows. He is a consultant. He's been a past president of STC Society level, galactic, as it were. He serves on the TC Camp board. He is an expert in XML, SGML, pretty much everything there is to do with TechCom. I've known Alan for years, and I'm delighted to have him here today. Alan wants you to save your questions until the end, so be sure and type them in when you think of them so you don't forget what you wanted to ask. If you want to ask your question directly to Alan, just put that in there, and when it comes time, I'll unmute you so that you can ask your question to him directly. Alan, you're getting ready to show your screen.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. How's my audio going?
I see that, but not your screen yet.
Okay. And how's my, do you see my screen?
I do not.
Maybe I didn't. I didn't hit the magic, the pop-up that that went under.
Perfect.
So
I see rocks.
Let's try this again. You see where are those rocks from? Bonus points here. That is Mars. That is the surface of Mars.
Because of the color. But anyway.
It just knocks me out that I can have the surface of Mars as my background image. That's just so cool.
Awesome.
So. Okay, and Evernote is asking me to update my email. I don't want to do that. There should be a presenter-only mode for these things. Anyway, let me get started. So thank you so much, Liz, for that gracious introduction. I'm Alan Hauser, essentially an independent consultant and trainer. I do have a corporate umbrella that I work under called Group Wellesley Incorporated. So the name of my company is much bigger than the number of staff. So. And I'm here. I'm going to try to respect everybody's time and keep this under half an hour. I do hope to have plenty of time for questions. So I like to run interactive, even collaborative sessions. So I hope we all get some good ideas and exchange good ideas and learn from each other. So we're talking about when to use DITA, when not to use DITA. Now I try to sell myself as a process improvement person. So I like to go into organizations and examine their workflows, their business requirements, their constraints, their budgets, their staff, and suggest improvements to their publishing processes. And that takes a number of forms, and sometimes it's DITA and sometimes it's not. And I've learned some of the distinctions that tend to apply in making that decision, and I hope to share some of those here today. I'll also mention I think I have a bit of a reputation, especially in the DITA community, as the DITA consultant that does not like DITA, and that is partially deserved, in part because I tend to point out when the emperor has no clothes and when something is not appropriate. So we'll get into that in a few minutes. So what's different about DITA? And now I'm not going to go into what DITA stands for or maps and topics and the DITA 101 type of discussion that you can find in hundreds of other places. So we're going to assume that everybody here knows what DITA is. But in categorizing DITA, for the purposes of this discussion, DITA is an architecture. It's not a product, it's a framework, and it's a framework or an architecture that you can apply to solve technical publishing problems. And when we look at technical publishing problems, we have the components of a publishing workflow. We have the authoring, we have the review and approval phase, we have managing your content, content management, source control, whatever form that takes. We have the publishing component, and we have the translating component. So organizations that adopt DITA are typically trying to solve problems in one or more or maybe all of these phases. And DITA as an architecture gives you the ability to do that, to optimize your authoring processes, to optimize your content management processes, to custom design your publishing processes. But that's a two-edged sword. It gives you the capability to design each part of the process and optimize that process for your own requirements and constraints and customer needs. But at some level, it forces you to do that. So that requires time, effort, investment, etc. Now, there are tools that are based on DITA that will do much of this for you, and that is certainly an option. There are also tools that are not based on DITA that will do these things for you, and that's one of the distinctions I hope to make during our brief time together. Okay, so I see a lot of DITA projects that also have a core component of process improvement. So it's not just a migration to DITA, but it's a reevaluation of the authoring processes, of the information architecture, of the writing style, of moving from book types of deliverables to topic-oriented authoring, of going to a minimalist approach. And DITA, fortunately, DITA was designed based on a lot of documentation best practices, technical publishing best practices. So DITA, the original designers of DITA from IBM are big fans of the minimalist approach to technical documentation. This was developed by a researcher who was at IBM at the time. He happens to be an STC honorary fellow and currently holds a professorship at Penn State University. So he was actually at the STC Summit, I believe, in Columbus last year. But John Carroll's work, John Carroll looked at how people use technical documentation and made a couple of fairly, maybe in hindsight, obvious assessments that people like task orientation. They like to use documentation to solve problems. They're usually they're often in trouble when they go to the documentation, so they like to get in there and get out. They like troubleshooting content, just to acknowledge the fact that there are often people try to do things themselves and then go to the documentation when they're in trouble. He also advocates encouraging experimenting. So a lot of DITA projects are also technical communication process improvement projects. So, and that's actually a very good thing. DITA can be, in a sense, and I don't want to use this pejoratively, I want to use this in a positive way. DITA can be a Trojan horse for process improvement, and that's that can be a good thing. On the other hand, every organization is different. I've also been involved with DITA deployments where the directive is to change as little as possible, to migrate to a DITA-based authoring and publishing workflow, sometimes because of a management directive, sometimes because of changes in tool versions or tool support. But I've also had cases where we migrate to DITA, but we change as little as possible about the author's workflow and how the organization creates, manages, and publishes its technical content. So, when should one use DITA? When should one not use DITA? Well, I'm going to note that a lot of, well, let's back up a little bit. The DITA Technical Committee, that's the organization, or that's the group, under the OASIS standards body. OASIS stands for, if I say it on the fly, organization, no, I'm not even going to try, but OASIS is the standards body that is over the DITA that the DITA Technical Committee is part of. And there are many volunteers on the DITA Technical Committee. A lot of the work in designing the DITA specification and the supporting infrastructures, I'm thinking specifically of the DITA Open Toolkit, which is sort of a reference implementation for processing DITA content. A lot of that is the work of volunteers, and anybody that uses DITA has a profound debt to the work of those individuals. Now, having said that, I'm going to propose that the DITA aficionados are maybe not very good at telling you when DITA is appropriate and when it's not appropriate. So I see, here's an example of a paper that was published last year. DITA, is it a universal solution? And nobody says, yes, DITA is great for this, that, and the other, but it's really not very good for these other things. So some prominent members of the DITA community say, is it a universal solution? Yes, mostly. And you don't get good distinctions of when DITA is appropriate and when it's not. So, and I in some of my experience, DITA, I like to characterize DITA as it's a home run when it's appropriate. It is an amazing solution for particular business problems, but it can be a disaster if it's not appropriate. If your organization is not facing those business problems, if you're not willing to make the investment in training and infrastructure and support and process improvement and migration and all those good things that happen in a data publishing environment. So that's one of the reasons that I'd like to speak on this topic. Okay, so I deal with a lot of different organizations with different types of problems, and if you drill down into DITA, DITA provides some pretty advanced capabilities to address the issues that technical documentation presents. So that's the topic orientation, reuse, aggregation, a lot of very advanced addressing capabilities for addressing, linking, content referencing. And when you look at the DITA spec, when you read the DITA spec or learn about DITA, there's a lot there. And it can be somewhat intimidating, somewhat overwhelming. So a couple of responses to that. You don't have to use all of DITA. Some people use DITA mainly for the topic orientation, DITA topics, DITA maps. Some people need very advanced reuse, very advanced linking and content addressing, and that's all there. So there's this presentation on SlideShare that I like by Elliot Kimber. He's one of the most prominent members of the DITA community and does a tremendous amount of volunteer support on for example, the Yahoo DITA users email list. So very, very prolific member of the community. In which he talks about why is DITA hard? It's hard because technical communication is hard. The requirements of technical documentation are hard. So, and he also makes an argument that writers compensate for the lack of support for advanced content reuse by doing a lot of legacy practices like copy and pasting. And when you have the capabilities for advanced reuse, then that's new to a lot of authors. It requires training, it requires rethinking your workflows, etc. Now, one response that I have to this, I agree that DITA is hard because many of the requirements of technical documentation are hard. But I also deal with companies that have a single product or a product or two, and they really need a manual, and maybe they just need a PDF. So not everybody's requirements are difficult to provide or difficult to accommodate. And in those cases, especially, those are the cases where DITA tends to be overkill. In part because DITA makes it reminds me of my days working with Unix. What was the line? Unix makes easy things easy and hard things possible. So, and I think that applies to several different technologies. So anyway, there's a link to the slide presentation. I'd encourage you to take a look. So, keys for success with DITA. One is to start with a very careful analysis of your requirements and choose DITA. Choose DITA because you have appropriate motivations for doing so. You have the requirements that DITA addresses and addresses well. So as a consultant, my worst projects are those that start like this, where a customer or a prospect comes to me and says, we want to use FrameMaker and SharePoint to do DITA. Will you help us? So they've chosen the tools, they've chosen the content management system. By default, they've chosen the publishing component as well, which we'll talk about in a moment, often without considering whether these are the appropriate tools and technologies to use. It just so happens you can use SharePoint with DITA, but it's really hard, it's really clunky, it's not at all optimized for topic-oriented content, for content reuse. SharePoint will not recognize DITA features. So it's really coming in with a tool's choice before the requirements analysis it's a really big hack, and this is this type of engagement. I try to punt, or I try to back up and make sure that a real requirements analysis has been done. So let's go into some of the things that because we don't have much time, we'll talk about. We'll sort of cherry pick what's hard about DITA, and one thing. I think two things tend to come to mind. That is migration. Migrating to DITA is challenging. It's expensive. Publishing is the other thing that's difficult with DITA. And some of that, or a lot of that, I find, is just changing expectations about the capabilities of publishing. So this is a quote that a buddy of mine made. And it's a couple of years old, but it's still true, or I believe it's still true. I can still identify DITA content, both on the web and in PDF, without looking at PDF properties, because it tends to have a certain look, a certain feel, and it is the product of automated publishing. That is a big change for anybody going from desktop publishing, where you have very complete and reasonably easy control over the look and feel of your PDFs, to automated publishing, where everything is published based on rules. And the capabilities of DITA, the tools that were developed to generate, especially PDF from DITA, have never been very good. So there are some options out there. I actually happen to like FrameMaker a lot for generating PDF if you need rich PDF from DITA, just to mention that. So, but in general, the tools and the workflows for generating PDF have not been very good with DITA for a number of very arcane historical reasons. Now, for I think maybe the first 10 years or so of DITA's lifetime, the DITA community, I sensed that they responded by continually questioning PDF. So I'd go to a conference, I'd attend a presentation, and the presentations were about getting rid of PDF. And now it's 2016, and I think we've generally acknowledged that PDF is here to stay. The conference presentations, I noticed they used to start with who is still publishing PDF, like, are you crazy? And now they start with who needs to publish PDF, because a lot of people do and will continue to need to do that for the foreseeable future. So how do you accommodate PDF publishing in an automated DITA workflow? So one of my favorite mechanisms for doing this is let it go. Accept the PDF that you get. And this is something that inevitably happens when I migrate somebody from desktop publishing to automated publishing. I get a comment to the effect of, on page 83 of this document, I don't like the page break, or I don't like the line break, etc. And I try to train my clients to let it go. That thing you're noticing probably has no effect on your customer's experience with that content. There are other approaches. Sarah O'Keefe writes a lot about DITA workflows, about adopting DITA in real organizations. And one approach, certainly Adobe InDesign is another publishing engine that is very well known for its layout capabilities. And the appropriate combination of automation with the ability to go in and tweak designs can hit a sweet spot. So that's another approach. Okay, so that was just a few words on one of the things that's hard about DITA. Okay, so in starting to wrap up, we have our standards-based solutions versus proprietary solutions, and that's basically the binary decision that you need to make. Now, standards-based, it's sort of like mom and apple pie. It sounds good, and proprietary sounds bad. But what if we replace proprietary with off-the-shelf? So a standards-based solution in which, unless you purchase an end-to-end tool based on that standard, in general, you have to specify each of the components. Now, you have to specify or you get to specify. Those are two sides of the coin, and that may be an advantage. But off-the-shelf solutions, they give you features, they give you functionality. There may not be a lot of configuration required, and they are supported by a real company that needs to stay in business by pleasing its customers. So there are some advantages to off-the-shelf and proprietary solutions. You may find, if you're using a standards-based solution, the pace of standards development is very slow. You may have to wait years and years for a feature that you need. With proprietary solutions or off-the-shelf solutions, you may get the features you need much more quickly. So just a brief comparison, brief example of the differences between those two approaches. Okay, so let's see, I'm about at the end of the time that I wanted to speak, so I hope we can open this up for questions and have some good discussion, and I'll hand it back to Liz.
I love that. That's great. All right, folks, time to type in your questions. And while you do, let me tell you what's coming up. All right. First things first, TC Camp is coming east. TC Summer Camp will be held in Fairfax, Virginia on July 30th, 2016. It's a fairly central location for the eastern portion of the U.S. We do hold it on a Saturday, so people can attend without missing work or having to convince their employer to pay them twice, once to attend something new and once for not being in the office. If you've never been to an unconference, it's very different from a regular conference. Session topics are decided by the attendees on the day of the event. It's really kind of amazing. TC Summer Camp is derived from TC Camp, which is held in January in the Bay Area. We're a 503c nonprofit organization, and the day is free. The morning workshops are voted on by the community. The survey is still out, but these are the leading topics for workshops coming up. And really, the workshops just have a very small fee to cover the cost of the event. Anybody who's been to it in the Bay Area doesn't miss it year after year. We're closing in on 200 people after 4 years, and we had 160 that first year. Go to tccamp.org to learn about how it works and details of our very first summer event next month. Next up is the TC Dojo Mastermind Group. This is a monthly driven member discussion group where attendees present specific challenges on the topics on their mind in a confidential, supportive environment. Mastermind groups have been cited in Forbes as being valuable to the attendees. We have two going on right now. One is Everything TechCom, and the other is product focused on Arbortext and Windchill, because that's where a lot of our customers are working. It's a collaborative peer-to-peer environment where everybody lends their expertise to each other. It's kind of been amazing to participate in and a lot of fun too. You can sign up at the TC Dojo website. Yes, our topic coming up this month, which is 2 weeks from now, or I think 2 weeks from now, is variables, conditioning, and profiling content, that kind of thing. And next month in the dojo, Tony Mantich will be here to talk about metadata, the queen to the content king. Be sure and sign up for that next month. It's going to be really good. She's going to talk about specifically metadata and TechCom information and what you need to know. How do you sign up? Well, you go to tcdojo.org, and all of the sessions are at the bottom. I can show you here. You just scroll down to the bottom, and all the upcoming sessions are here. And Alan's video will be posted up here probably later today. So if you want to rewatch what we've had today, that's where we're at. Okay. Next, let's get to the questions. All right. Here we are. Oh, I was there. All right, here's our first question. Here's our first thing. Hi, Alan. Hi, Liz from Neil. Hey, Neil. If you just want to say hi, please put that in there too. We love to see that. OASIS is the Organization for the Advancement of Structured Information Standards. Thank you, Riley, for looking that up. Nolan also posted a question about, do you know who created the paper from Paris Diderot? I posted the answer, the URL, in the public question and answer box. So if you want to get the paper, you can just click, they'll be sure to open up the question box and click the link to the answer of Nolan's question. Oh, here's a good question for Alan. Can you extend these arguments against DITA to structured authoring in general, or are these specific to the DITA architecture over another XML-based language? Good question.
Okay, that is a great question. I think the answer is yes, and I'm going to share an experience I recently had. I just got my latest issue of Chief Content Officer, and this is the monthly publication of the Content Marketing Institute. They have a huge conference in Cleveland, I believe, every September. So this is a conference all about content marketing, and this is a special issue on content creation. I almost used it in my slides, and I thought, oh, you know, XML is a big unifier. It's breaking down silos, etc. Let me look at their content creation tools and see what matches TechCom's. There is zero alignment. So I would say topic-oriented authoring is appropriate in many solutions, but not all solutions. There are all kinds of different requirements, all kinds of different business goals, and I think TechCom has a lot to learn from the content marketing folks, and vice versa. We also have a lot to learn from the web content folks who handle topic-oriented authoring totally differently than we do. In most web content classes, seminars, presentations I go to, XML is not even mentioned, and I find that fascinating. So, short answer, yes, I think those arguments could be extended. I hate to say against structured authoring, but structured authoring is not appropriate in all situations.
All right, here's another good one. Alan, do you mean you consider there are no tools that would be considered off the shelf for DITA?
If I said that, I did not mean to say that, or that was not a big point that I wanted to imply. So, okay, so I think choosing an off-the-shelf tool that has DITA as an underlying infrastructure, I think that's certainly an appropriate path. So we can talk about whether tools that use DITA as an underlying infrastructure are maybe more constrained than proprietary tools. So, and that's certainly another discussion to have.
I'm thinking maybe we should have a nice panel about that, because I think that's a real issue. One of the things that you said that I was going to ask about too was standards-based versus proprietary. And the more I see over the years, even people who are totally standards-based end up, when it comes to the generation of the whatever binary deliverable comes out, usually print, it's almost all, even standards-based are keyed, the style sheets are keyed toward that, the pluses or minuses in that rendering tool. Just like, you know, anybody who develops software, you pick one compiler because everything works slightly differently between them. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yep, absolutely. So, and I think one of the root causes for this, the difficulty in letting things go, is we get used to the features that are provided by the tools we're using. And when we change tools, when a tool does not support the features we're used to, we get upset and we do somersaults trying to find workarounds to regain to use those features. What we should be doing is figuring out how to optimize the features of the new tool, which hopefully we've chosen for very good reasons.
Right. That's one of the hardest things, I think. So, and that's why I loved you said, when the worst part is when you choose side, the tools before the requirements, right? That is my biggest, that's the thing I present on the most about, because I can't stand it when that happens. You're doing the wrong thing, right?
Right. Yeah. Cart before the horse.
Yes. Don't do that. Know your requirements. Know your needs. Oh my gosh. And can you tell DITA when you see it? Alan?
Were you asking me? Or?
Yes, that's for you.
Yes. Yeah, in general. I'm also a fan of checking PDF properties, and one of the earlier questions might have been referring to that. So I see a lot of papers written advocating DITA. If you check the PDF properties, open a PDF in Adobe Acrobat, do I believe it's Control D or Clover D on the Macintosh, you will see the PDF properties that very often has the authoring tool. So I see a lot of pro DITA papers written in Adobe InDesign, PageMaker even. So and yeah, the paper about DITA as a universal solution, I suspect PDF properties were sanitized because there's no information about the authoring tool in those PDF properties. So you know, call me a conspiracy theorist, but yeah, I only know what I see.
All right. Well, let's see if there's any more questions. You guys have a couple of more seconds to fill things out. Oh, it looks like we're all. I don't see any more questions. That paper looks good, so be sure and grab that out of the question list, and I will post these questions to Alan also so that he can maybe write a blog post about the answers to the questions that came in here, and hopefully post a link to the paper because I think a lot of people are interested in that. Did that come out of the TCOM last fall?
I don't believe it was TCOM. So, and yes, if I did not provide the link on my slide, I regret that. So I'm glad somebody found that and shared it.
Oh, it says I think they are a student who wrote in TechCom who wrote the study paper. He thinks that's what somebody says about that. I don't know. Okay. Students do good work too. We know. All right. Oh, here's one. Someone is very interested in how to get a decent PDF out of standards compliant XML, but I think that's a bigger question than we can answer today.
Yeah, being over time, that's going to be a tough one. But there are a couple of solutions. In general, it's either time or money, and you can customize an automated publishing workflow to your heart's content. But that requires effort.
Yes, and you become a software development house in the process. So don't forget the effort to update, maintain, and migrate as standards evolve. All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Alan. That was fantastic, full of really good information. And we look forward to seeing you at summer camp and anybody else who wants to come. It's going to be a good time.
Okay, thank you so much, Liz. Thanks to the audience. I'm grateful that you spent a half an hour with me and with each other. So I hope you gained some value from it, and I hope to see you all down the road.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye.